Good morning once again. Welcome, a very warm welcome to everyone here to Biowatch South Africa's webinar on examining opportunities for agroecology in the South African school nutrition program. As a social and environmental justice organization critiquing the impacts of the industrial food system, what children in South Africa are eating is really of concern to Biowatch and has been for some time. And we're really grateful for the support of Kinder Noordhilfe in being able to undertake the work that we will be presenting today. Hunger is a growing crisis in South Africa, and more than half of South Africans are food insecure. And around 1 out of every 6 South Africans live below the food poverty line, surviving on only 28 Rand or less per day. And not surprisingly, then, 1 out of every 4 children are stunted. And although South Africa produces more than enough food for all living here, for many people, the food prices are simply too high for the income families have. And this situation is increasingly exacerbated by global crises. It was COVID, but currently the war in Iran, which is driving up fuel prices, driving up the price of food, also through a shortage in fertilizer access for the commercial sector. And we now have a predicted super El Nino event, which is likely to bring more extreme weather. So this situation really needs to be addressed. And 2 of the main interventions that government has had is one, the social grant system to increase incomes, and then the school nutrition program for children who really need the food when they're developing. So as much as these help, there are many things that are not addressing these are not addressing. So some of these are the structural issues in the organization of our food system, equitable access to resources, and growing corporate concentration. And these interventions are currently also not addressing the malnutrition that so many South Africans are suffering due to poor quality food and increasingly processed foods that are leading to alarming levels of diabetes and other health concerns. And so this is where we really believe that agroecology can make a difference in both the transformation of the food system, but also at the community level to provide fresh, nutritious, and cultural foods to children, and also potentially a market for smallholder farmers. But as we have found through this investigation and that we will speak to today, much still needs to be done to realize this potential. So I'm going to now welcome our presenters in the order that they will be presenting in. So if I can please ask the presenters to put on their cameras and to start introducing Rose Williams. She has served on the board of Biowatch and then became the director of Biowatch in 2009. She has experience in botany and education and was the curator of the KwaZulu-Natal herbarium before stepping into the director's role. Welcome, Rose. Next is Stha Yeni, who is a researcher, activist, and popular education facilitator who has worked on land, food, water, gender, and environmental justice issues in Southern Africa for nearly 2 decades. She has published on land rights, social reproduction, feminist popular education, and the intersections of gender, climate change, and food systems. She holds a PhD in land and agrarian studies from the University of the Western Cape and is currently a postdoctoral fellow in the NRF Chair in Sustainable Rural Futures at Rhodes University. Welcome, Stha. And then Lihle Ngobese, she has studied in the fields of environment, education, and community development. She has worked as a project manager with different organizations in the environmental, education, and agricultural community development fields, most recently in early childhood development projects, and particularly at Cotlands. And Lihle has been supporting Biowatch in this children's project, working with children in KwaZulu-Natal community and conducting the survey with schools which he will be sharing with us today. So I will now hand over to Rose.
Thanks, Vanessa. And just to check, can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, that's great. So my role today is really just to give a little bit of background to the work and to Biowatch's work with children. It was a first step for Biowatch to work with children and quite a learning experience for us. So what it was actually an 18-month pilot project, and it was focusing on supporting children, but also with a focus on climate change, on food nutrition, and the context that we find ourselves in. So I've got a few slides to speak to. The first one shows some of the artwork that we did with a primary school in Matuba, which is about 200 kilometers north of Durban. And this formed one part of the project. But if you could go to the next slide, please, Zama. So although it says it was a 1-year pilot, it actually turned out it's more like an 18-month pilot. But the 3 parts to the project were firstly working with children and grandchildren of largely women farmers that we've been working with for many years at a place called KwaZulu-Natal, which is close to in the Matuba district. And that really was experimenting with doing lovely things with children. It was experiments, it was storytelling, gardening, recycling, and really making agroecology come alive. So it just wasn't just agriculture. They really got a sense of the holistic approach of agroecology. The other 2, and I'll speak more to both of these a bit later. One is for some work at a 20 primary school, and then lastly, the research. But Zama, if you could go to the next slide. So this first part of the project involved working with the children and grandchildren of the Zimele farmers. There were about 30 children. And on the left of the image, you can just see the Biowatch's Children's Agroecology Winter Program, which was a huge success. And the plate that's on the child's knees is looking at foods which they really like. Zama, if you could go to the next slide. And it also involved things like making protein blocks for goats. That's the photo that you can see on the left, or other activities with paint and drawing meals, etc. Next slide, please. The second part of the project was, as mentioned, at a primary school. And one of the women farmers that we worked with was the key support to the school, firstly with working with their school garden. And there were a lot of lessons around that. But the top left, you can see World Food Day in October last year. And that was a huge celebratory event focusing on agroecology, lots of music, dance, delicious and nutritious food. And then next slide, please. The third part of the project was looking at the school nutrition program. And I think we could really, in South Africa, one can see the complexity facing the country with malnutrition, with stunting, sort of increasing levels of stunting, climate change, extreme climate events, impacts on biodiversity. So there's a long-term focus of Biowatch on agroecology and how we can really promote it in the country, and also this focus on nutrition. So the work that the research that started speaks to the school nutrition program. And then the work that Lihle did was actually a focus on the ground on 6 schools in the Matuba area, seeing what the experiences of children and educators were on the school nutrition program. So that's just a brief overview to our project. I just also want to mention that the support was through Kindernorth Healthcare, but also through some of our other donors, the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, Bread for the World, and Fast in Action. I'd now like to hand over to Stha. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. Let me share my screen. All right. So thanks, Rose, and thanks, Vanessa, for the introduction. And good morning, colleagues. It's good to be here, and thanks to Biowatch for offering the opportunity to share this research. So the presentation I'm going to give is based on a research paper which was commissioned by Biowatch on South Africa's National Nutrition Program with a particular focus on KwaZulu-Natal province. So I'll just briefly discuss the policy and implementation of the program and then share some findings relating to the procurement system, smallholder farmers, the school food gardens, and some lessons from other countries which could be relevant for South Africa. So, just a bit of a background. The nutrition program has a much longer history. It started back in the 1940s already, when the state at the time, the apartheid state, introduced a milk scheme. And then it went on for a couple of years and then it was discontinued. And then fast forward to 1994, the new government reintroduced it as part of broader efforts to address poverty and inequality. So at first, it was under the Department of Health. And then later, by 2004, it shifted to be under the Department of Education. And then it became known as the National School Nutrition Program. So importantly, the program was conceived primarily as an educational intervention, and and the assumption was simple that children who were hungry were unable to learn. So that was the logic of the intervention, and that's why it moved to from the Department of Health to Department of Education. So its aim was to reduce short-term hunger, improve attendance, improve concentration, and contribute to children's health and development. But over time, the objectives were added. It later included nutrition education, food production through school gardens. So yeah. Okay, so why this research? So two reasons why this research is important. The first reason directly links to Biowatch's work, which is to support agroecological farming and their work with smallholder farmers and schools, as Rose has mentioned. And so for that reason, it raises important questions. Whether can the National School Nutrition Program create a meaningful market for local farmers while also improving children's nutrition? And the second reason why this is important, why this research matters, is that if we think about the nature of South Africa's agrarian structure, which is highly unequal, despite policy commitments to supporting smallholder farmers, many farmers continue to face significant barriers in accessing markets, government procurement programs are often presented as one way of creating opportunities for smallholder farmers, but in practice, there are a lot of challenges, as I'm going to show later in this presentation. So the broader concern of this research is not only what children eat, but also who benefits economically from the program. And so the questions that the research asked, firstly, was about what is the policy itself, the National School Nutrition Program policy, how it's been implemented nationally, but also mainly in KwaZulu-Natal because that's where Biowatch works. And then what progress and challenges are experienced in implementation, particularly in relation to nutrition, procurement, food gardens, and the smallholder farmer participation. And I also looked at what procedures must smallholder farmers follow in order to be able to supply schools, and the challenges related to that. And then I looked at few cases from other countries that we could draw from. In terms of methods, it was mainly desktop, like reviewing literature, going through policy reviews, going through government reports and evaluations of the program, but also drawing on some journal articles that have been written by some academics who have an interest in this topic in KZN, but just in the country broadly. And then I also did some interviewed some of the service providers in KZN. Some of the limitations of the study is that the scope, of course, I was just focusing on KZN mainly, but also the time frame, which was like a short study, just to review what was happening. So it was about a month to do this work, so not a lot of time to cover all parts, but it does give like an idea of what is happening in the program. Another challenge was accessing government officials in the provincial department and also in the district office. I got some contacts, but towards in the end, they pulled out. I don't know why, but yeah. So in the end, I couldn't interview any government official involved in this program. I ended up interviewing service providers who were quite generous with their time and knowledge, and which was quite useful for the research. Yeah, and another limitation is that there aren't a lot of evaluations of this program. I think the last evaluation was done in around 2014, 2015, and was published in 2016. And there hasn't been um, any evaluation since then. And this limitation is also acknowledged by a lot of academics who've been writing about this, that there's limited information about actually the performance of this program, especially whether or not it does meet its objectives of improving the nutritional aspects of children. Right. Okay, so I'll just talk briefly about the policy itself before I go into details about the findings relating to smallholder farmers. So the NSNP is guided by a national policy adopted by the Department of Education and is implemented through national, provincial, district, and school level. It is organized around three pillars. The first one is the school feeding, so giving children food every day. That's the first pillar. And I think that's the pillar that most people are familiar with. The second one is the nutrition education and deworming pillar, which aims to promote healthy eating habits and address health issues that affect learning. The third one is the sustainable food production, which includes school food gardens and other food production projects. So as I will show later in other slides, while the school feeding receives most of the attention, like the first pillar, it receives most of the attention and resources. The other two pillars, the one on nutrition and the one on food gardens and food production, they are significantly underfunded and often neglected. Okay, so about funding. So I think at this point it's useful to look at how the program is funded and how food is procured. So the program is funded through a conditional grant, which is allocated to the Provincial Department of Education. The 2025-2026 budget was 9.798 billion, and the daily allocation rates remain very, very low at for 4 rand, about 4 rands per learner in primary school, 4 rand 82, sorry, 4 rand 84 per learner in secondary schools. So although the overall budget, I mean, 9 billion appears substantial, once it is divided across millions of learners, the daily allocation per child remains extremely low, as you can see. And this problem emerged as one of the strongest themes in both literature and in the interviews when I interviewed the service providers. Service providers consistently argued that the budget makes it difficult to provide meals that meet nutritional requirements, particularly in the context of rising food prices. So, and in terms of procurement, the program uses like two systems. One is centralized, and the other one is decentralized. So the centralized model basically provides greater control and oversight, but it tends to favor larger suppliers, large-scale suppliers, those who are quite formal and more, yeah, more well-resourced. Whereas the decentralized model potentially creates more opportunities for local sourcing and participation of smallholder farmers. It also requires stronger capacity at school and at district level. So an important question running through the research is whether procurement can be used not only to feed children, but also to support local economic development through supporting small-scale farmers. Right. And I mean, what I'm doing here is really giving you just a summary. The report has more details. So I'm just going through these slides very quickly because I don't also have a lot of time just for you to get a sense. But those who are interested can read the report, which is more detailed about all of this and how it works. Okay, so the implementation. What does it look like nationally? I'll start with national experience, and then I'll go to KZN in particular. So the national evaluation presents a mixed picture of the program. On the positive side, the program reaches, based on evaluations, it reaches millions of learners every day, every school day, of course, not on weekends. And it remains one of the government's most significant social interventions. However, a number of implementation challenges persist. One concern is One concern is nutritional quality. Only about half of the schools that were evaluated were serving meals that included all three required food groups. Often vegetables and fruits were missing in the meals. Another concern was that of timing. Because the program is designed for children to be able to concentrate and learn, that it means they have to eat before class. But only a few schools in the evaluation actually fed children like early in the morning before school starts. Um, so the evaluation highlighted challenges relating to infrastructure, poor water supply. Some schools don't have water. It becomes difficult to even prepare the food, especially in rural areas, schools that are poorly resourced. There was issue around storage, food getting rotten. There's no proper storage. There are no facilities, but also the people who were handling food. They are called volunteers, although they do get a stipend, I think of 900 rand per month or something like that. Also, they were not trained. So this is something that came out of the evaluation, but also from the literature that I reviewed, highlighting some of the challenges with the implementation. So taken together, all these findings suggest that while the program succeeds in delivering food, it often struggles to achieve its broader objectives, which I explained at the beginning of the presentation. Now let's go to KZN experience. So um, so with KZN, what is interesting is that it illustrates many of the challenges that were identified nationally. So you find them in KZN as well. And historically, the province relied on the centralized procurement model, but more recently, they've attempted to introduce a hybrid, so to use both centralized and decentralized where it was applicable. Um, yeah, so and the idea of moving to, or introducing the decentralized model was to try and um, incorporate so local suppliers work more closely with what we call SMMEs, small to medium enterprises. So it was an important shift because it reflected the growing recognition that procurement can be used to support local economic development, but implementation proved extremely difficult. Um, so from the interviews, particularly with the suppliers in KZN, but also reading media reports because there was a lot written in the media around the challenges of the program in the province. So some of the things that were raised as problems were payment delays, so weak communication, procurement bottlenecks, inadequate planning. Yeah, so I mean, one of the outcomes of this was that there were disruptions in milk delivery. Some suppliers couldn't, if they're not paid on time by the department, then there were delays in them purchasing food, delivering food, and then kids would skip meals. So those were the just main challenges that were highlighted in the research. Um, Let me see. So this is just a table that shows how KZN compares nationally. I mean, there's not much of a difference really if you look at uh, other provinces, um, because most of the challenges identified in the province are also present nationally. However, KZN stands out because of the scale of disruption associated with procurement reforms and delivery failures. So the scale there is high of disruption. So the lesson here is that the policy reform alone is not enough. Effective implementation capacity is equally important. You can have a look at this in much detail in your own time. I won't go into it, but I just wanted to show you just briefly. It's also this table is also in the report. I took it from there. All right. So what is the role of smallholder farmers in the program? Which I think is of interest for most people here, particularly Biowatch and others who work with smallholder farmers. So this was a central concern of the research, but of course I had to first give you the background so that you understand where this is located. So, I mean, often the school feeding program is presented as a way of creating markets for smallholder farmers while simultaneously improving nutrition. But findings suggest that this potential remains largely unrealized in KwaZulu-Natal. Most service providers that I interviewed continue to source food from wholesalers and supermarket chains rather than from smallholder farmers. And this is not because they don't want to source from smallholder farmers. That's not the reason. But farmers face a range of structural barriers, including limited access to information. Uh, Transport is one issue. I remember one of the gentlemen I interviewed. He said because small farmers, particularly in rural areas, are scattered all over. Sometimes the roads are very bad, so it's and they don't have like cars to bring the produce. So he's the one who must go and collect, and it takes up a lot of time, a lot of fuel, which and then he works at a loss because what the government pays him is also not enough. So for him, it's more convenient to just go to a supermarket in Duba, go to Boxer or ShopRite and buy from there and then deliver to schools. So, so those are some of the challenges that the service providers raised. But others said they also don't know where the farmers are. The information is not available, so it's not like there's a database where you can say, okay, in this area, in this region, here's a list of farmers. This is what they have. This is what they are producing. This is what's available at this time. Such infrastructure is not there. Um, but also some struggle to produce sufficient quantities there's because farmers themselves have challenges with access to land, sufficient land, um, infrastructure like fencing, water is a big issue, and now when rains are not even predictable, it becomes even more difficult. Farmers have to irrigate; they don't have irrigation systems. So all these structural challenges because smallholder farmers don't get really enough support from the state, and so this is also a challenge. So what this tells us is that the challenge goes beyond procurement policy itself. It is linked to broader questions of agrarian support, infrastructure, and rural development broadly. Um, let's see. Yeah, this is a quote from one of the service providers who said, "We are giving kids food we will never feed our kids because four rand and 2 cents per lana. I mean, that it's lower. It's even lower than what the government spends on prisoners. And I think he said prisoners. The government spent about 17 rand per prisoner per day, but for children in schools, it's 4 rand. Um, yeah. So about the food gardens, Vanessa, I don't know how much time I have, but about food gardens, just warn me. Um,
You're still all
uh,
right.
okay, okay, great. But also, if I'm running out of time, you just tell me because I won't be able to see your hand or anything. But thanks. So with regards to the school food gardens, they are part of the pillar of the National School Nutrition Program. Um, so what is striking is that while the school feeding receives considerable attention, I think I said this earlier, that the gardens they receive very little support, even though they are an important pillar of the officially, it's in the policy of the program. And evidence just from literature suggests that school gardens have a significant potential uh, if they are really well supported. Excuse me, they can improve children's consumption of fruits and vegetables. It can create opportunities for practical learning for kids. It can strengthen environmental awareness and contribute to household food security much broadly. And in many respects, they align closely with the work of Biowatch and many other organizations who are concerned with agroecology in South Africa. However, the research found that food gardens remain severely underfunded and poorly supported. Many schools lack water. There's no infrastructure. There's no dedicated person uh, to look after the garden. In some cases, gardens survive only because maybe there's a committed teacher or a committed community member who would volunteer their time and go there. Other than that, there's nothing that is within the structure of the schools that enables this to happen regularly and in a proper way. So there isn't any of that kind of support. Um, so the issue is not whether schools, or rather, not whether school gardens have value. There's no doubt about that. The issue is that the program has not invested sufficiently in realizing this potential of school gardens. Um, yeah. So I think I've already said all of this. So the slides are for you. I'm reading from my notes. That's why sometimes I'm behind with the slides and I've already said what I wanted to say. Um, yeah, okay. Let's continue. Okay, so of course, the school feeding program is not a South African thing. It's been happening in many other countries, many other countries. So I uh, just review a few that at least could resonate with us. So I checked Brazil, I checked India, and I checked Ghana. Also to have a geographical spread like Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and then and see. And of course, it's not always easy to compare because if you want to compare countries, then the countries have to be very similar politically, structurally, and everything else for you to really do a proper comparison. But I thought this would be a fair kind of comparison because these are countries also who have also their own challenges, who are also struggling economically, like South Africa, but who've been able to at least do something around the school feeding program that we could learn from. Um, so these cases that I've highlighted, they are useful because they demonstrate that the school feeding program can do much more than just address hunger. It can support local agricultural development, can improve nutrition, can create livelihood opportunities, which I think is also what uh, we need in South Africa. And I think Brazil, out of the three, is perhaps the most well-known example. And what makes the Brazilian case particularly significant is the legal requirement that at least 30% of the school feeding budget must be spent on what they call family farming. But yeah, that would be equivalent to smallholder farming. That's the concept we use here. So this is a legal requirement. And so this creates a guaranteed market for smallholder farmers while also improving access to fresh food in schools. India demonstrates the importance of linking school feeding uh, with broader nutrition and health interventions, while Ghana illustrates how school feeding can be used to support local agricultural uh, um, development. Um, so again, more details about each of these countries in the report, but maybe what I can say is that taken together, these three examples, they show that school feeding programs can simultaneously contribute to nutrition, education, if livelihoods, rural livelihoods, when they are adequately funded and they are this should be deliberately linked to local food system. Um, and from the research, it's very clear that in South Africa that is not the case. It's in the discretion of the supplier, what is convenient for them. And also the fact that smallholder farmers are also not very well supported, that also contributes. So it's not uh, structured. It's ad hoc. I interviewed one service provider who supplies schools in Umlazi, which is an urban setting, and he said he does source from smallholder farmers, those food gardens, like there are people who are farming in groups in the townships. But then he said because it's easier. I mean, he lives in Umlazi himself. People are on WhatsApp. Because I asked him, so how did you identify these farmers that you source from? He said, no, we have a WhatsApp group. So you know how the WhatsApp groups spread. Oh, there's this WhatsApp group, and then you tell another one, and this other one tells another one. So it happens like that. And then, so if you are lucky that you hear about this WhatsApp group and you're a farmer, then you join the WhatsApp group, and then you you are part of the system in that way, and then they will pick up from you. But also because it's in the township, the roads are way better than in rural areas. It's easier to just meet at the central point. You pick up. So it's easier there. So for rural areas, it's even more difficult. So, and I'm raising this point because suppliers do want to source from smallholder farmers. They have relationships with them. It's much easier. You can negotiate and all of that as opposed to these large retailers. But in terms of convenience, in terms of access, there are challenges, particularly in rural areas. Yeah.
You can
So,
start 1 minute if you can.
okay, 1 minute. Okay, let me conclude. I mean, we know the lessons of already. I've repeated them. So yeah, this is my last slide anyway. Um, so I mean, it's just to reiterate what I've been saying, that this is a very important program, but it really requires to be to be changed in how it is implemented. Smallholder farmers require government support, state support, for them to be able to supply schools. The budget is clearly very little. We have to think about infrastructure. I have to think about procurement challenges. Yeah, especially under-resourced schools. Yeah, so I think I'll end there, and then hand over to Lihle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stha. And we're noting all the questions and comments in the chat. Lihle, when you're ready.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Stha. Good morning, everyone. As it has been said, my name is Lihle Ngobese. I'll be giving presentation on the survey that was conducted on a national school nutrition program last year in 2025, September. Slide please, Zama. The purpose of the survey was to get the snapshot in 6 schools at Umpanyakude district on their experiences on National School Nutrition Program. Slide, please. The survey was conducted at Mtubatuba, as I mentioned, under Umpanyakude district in KZN. Mtubatuba is about 200 kilometers north of Durban. It was conducted in 6 schools, which is 3 primary schools and 3 high schools at Mtubatuba. Slide, please, Sama. Maybe if you can give the background on how it works, as Stha has mentioned. During the survey, we learned that the National School Nutrition Program provides 2 meals a day at primary school and 1 meal at high school. How it works is that at primary school, the learners who need the breakfast will arrive early, just before the classes could start, and have their porridge. Usually should be instant porridge, and have their main meals at any time between 9 and 11:15, depending on the break time for that particular school. Also for the high school learners, they'll have their main meal also at any time between 9 and 11:15, also depending on the break time for that particular school. In terms of appointing the supplier, the Department of Education will, of course, appoint the supplier. None of the schools buy anything directly from the shops, according to the survey. And none of the vegetables are sourced from the local farmers directly. I know Stha has also provided different figures, but when we did the survey last year, we got that from the principals that the department provides 358. The allocation is 358 cents for primary school learner and 390 for high school learners. And it must be mentioned that for most of the learners, this will be the only meal they have today, as the survey was done in deep rural areas at Mtubatuba. Slide, please, Sama. The survey method that we used for adults was one-on-one interviews. Adults, I mean the principal, the SGB members, school governing body, and also the food handlers. And for learners, we used the focal group, which is a participatory method. You'll see the slide below on how we did it on the learners. Slide, please, Sama. You can see here, this is the participatory method. Here they were writing the last meal they had at school during that week. I would like to mention some views from the learners. I must mention that out of all the schools where we did the survey, generally the learners enjoy the school meals. Actually, it is essential for them, although they mentioned things like it is not enough, especially for high school learners. because of number of reasons. They mentioned that the size has decreased dramatically if compared to what they were getting in previous years. And they have their food favorites depending on how it's being prepared by the food handlers. In other schools, they enjoy tin, fish, and rice. It really differs. But the main thing here was, especially for high school learners, that it is not enough. They get one spoon and it cannot keep them full for the whole day. Next slide please. And we also had recommendations from the learners that if they were to recommend on how the program can be improved, that maybe if the plates and the spoon can be provided for learners. Because at present, in most of the schools, they have to provide their own spoons and plates. Now, should it happen that the learner has forgotten to bring the plate, it means it's either he or she waits for the friend to finish before she could dish up for him or herself, or she or he is not going to dish up on that particular day. Now, it makes it very much difficult for them to access the food available at school on that particular day. They also mentioned that 1 spoon per child, because that's how they described it, that it's just 1 spoon. It's not enough if they were to have that the whole day. I can just imagine the high school learner who arrives at school at 7, maybe who needs to leave at 3 o'clock. That 1 spoon really wouldn't be enough for them. That's what they said. They also suggested that the food packages be made for needy children so that they can have supper at home, especially those that are staying at rented places next to schools. As I mentioned before, that they also suggested that each learner be provided with plates and cutlery for dishing up times. Some views from the school management team, including SGP and food handlers. They also confirmed that the meals are very important, they're essential. The meals are balanced in terms of it has vegetables, although it's not on daily basis as it is meant to. But there's a lack of fruit and vegetables during the week. As per the menu, the learners are supposed to get at least fruit once a week, but for some reasons, they're not being provided with the fruit. Generally, the meal size is mandated by the Department of Education. It is enough, but it is not big enough to keep the learner full for the whole day. They also mention things like the cooking gases that often run out halfway through the month. Now that they had to make alternatives on how do they have to prepare food if they run out of cooking gas. Mainly, they mentioned the facilities. I happened to go to some of the facilities, like the kitchen, the storerooms, at all the 6 schools that are surveyed. 2 of the schools, the kitchen was just a disaster waiting to happen. Old park home that you can say at any time it can fall. They are really definitely not at a good state. Facilities also include their fridges, their storerooms, their pots. They are not in good state. If I may mention that out of the 6 schools that are surveyed, 2 of them, I would say, had better facility in terms of they have the kitchen, they have the storeroom, but they also have their own challenges. Some other schools, it was just a disaster waiting to happen. Other comments they had is that the food not arriving on time in terms of like on Mondays because they're in deep rural areas. Now I can imagine the supplier having to drive from Tuba far north. It takes them a long time to get there, especially for the perishables on Mondays. It really becomes difficult to arrive on time so that the food handlers will prefer food on time. Also, the poor quality of food and not enough diversity on food itself. Slide, please, Sama. For me, the keynote or the takeaway note out of this, we're having this program that is essential, definitely essential, as being said by the learners, the principals, the school governing body. and with the school management team doing the best that they can with the little they have. But is 1 spoon of food per child enough? Is there anything that can be done out of that? The quality of food, the quantity of food, the facilities that are being used, including the kitchen, the storeroom, and everything, the accessibility to those schools. I know that the schools are doing the best they can with the little they have. We really agree that this is essential program, but one must look at it more deeply on how it can be improved to make it work better, especially for the learners. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you, everyone. I think you'll have to direct your questions through proper channels. But I would like to thank the schools where we conducted the survey, the school management teams, the governing bodies, the food handlers, but mainly the learners who were part of this. We took some of their time participating on the survey. It really helped a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lihle. Thanks for all the presentations. I'm sure it sparked a lot of questions and thoughts. We've had quite a few comments in the chat, and I'm going to just run through some of them for those who aren't able to read. Nora Hudson from Humane World has posted quite a bit about the experience in Brazil, which is really useful to learn from, and the ways, there's a lot of information around the way that Brazil organizes in response to hunger generally. And they've got a council at national level. They include all the departments and ministries. And then that cross-cutting intersectoral work is grounded right to local levels. Nora also mentioned the issue of cooking, that introducing sun ovens and wonder bags might help. And then she also has noted that one of the big problems with the school nutrition program is this recommendation of milk, and that many people in South Africa are lactose intolerant and can't digest that well, which causes problems. And so there's quite a big campaign around that. And fermented milk's better, but not unfermented milk. And then also Makgabo Matlo also mentioned that the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform could assist farmers to form cooperatives and to possibly run businesses. But then there's a whole lot of questions. So Makgabo, so you had 2 questions about the survey that we conducted. Just to say, the survey was run in quite a participatory way, as you saw from Lihle's presentation. So we didn't have the resources to run a province-wide survey. It was just really a snapshot in the area in which we work to see what was going on in comparison to the desktop and the interviews that Stha managed to get to really just, what's happening on the ground for some schools. And likewise, so we also didn't manage to look at any schools who had land care supporting the food gardens. In fact, the food garden issue was, it was only the primary schools that had gardens. The high schools didn't have gardens at all. And they said that learners were too busy for the gardens. But on the garden questions that you asked around the teachers, whether the teachers were involved and the governing bodies, and whether the activities in the garden were part of the school curriculum, I'd like to invite our colleague, Lawrence Mkilipi, who's our agroecology manager, if he could share a bit about the experience with the food garden that we looked at. Lawrence, if you're able to unmute, go ahead.
Good morning, Vanessa, and everyone in the platform. Some officials at schools, and some schools do have gardens which are mainly involving learners and the teachers, and some of the public works EPW's teams from next to schools. And in terms of support from the Department of Agriculture Extension at schools, I've not heard anything about that, whether they are doing some work at school. I only have some contact that the Department of Environmental Affairs also provide a school program with some certain schools for gardening. Yeah, that's all what I know about the involvement of some officials in the Department of Schools.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. And Makaba also asked, how do we ensure that school gardens are sustainable? Have you got any recommendations from our experience?
It's not sustainable in terms of school holidays. It's only operational when the schools are on, but during school holidays, you find that the operations in the gardens are quite flat, unless there's a volunteer, because when the schools are closed, everyone is gone home. Only the security sometimes is there. And also when it starts again in the next season, you have to always start afresh. So it's not a continuous production, it's seasonal, and also it's disrupted by the school holidays.
And in the school that we worked in closely, were there any activities that were part of the school curriculum? Or how were the children involved?
We were told that the garden has helped them a lot to interest children and also refer students to the garden for certain educational operations or syllabus. Teachers were taking kids to the garden for observing some of the life skill exercise, some biological activities. So it was helpful in the school that we engaged with for them to refer the kids. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just from our wider farmer network, some of the school garden projects that had been working were where the school had twinned with community members who were interested in farming, who worked the garden and shared produce and worked with the learners, but were there then to continue through the holidays. So that's perhaps a model to help the sustainability. Then we've got some questions from Norma Rudolph. One about whether fermented foods are focused on in the school nutrition program, and also what happens to children in rural areas who are not in school or in ECDs that are registered with the program. And I don't know if there's anyone, I know there's a lot of people on this call with a lot of knowledge in this area. I'm not sure if any of you would like to say something about that. I don't know about Lynn or anyone. If you could raise your hands or unmute. Or otherwise, if anyone else has questions or comments, if you can just raise your hand or indicate in the chat that you'd like to speak. Rose.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to add to what Lawrence said about the school gardens. And I think there is a disconnect between the school gardens being an important pillar of the school nutrition program that Stha mentioned, and actually what seems to happen on the ground. And although ours was a pilot and just focusing on 6 schools, it was only the primary schools that had school gardens. So there was something about these school gardens seemingly not something for high schools. And so that's something which needs to be addressed. Also, the resources that are needed for a school garden. So fencing, for example, if you've got goats coming in, that eat everything. That's a problem. You need the fencing, you need water, and also the size of the school garden. If it's really small, it can only make a small difference to the school meals. So one actually does need quite extensive land to make a significant contribution to the school feeding scheme. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. Nothando?
Greetings to everyone. For me, it's not a question. It's just a comment. Firstly, I would like to thank Biowatch for making this meeting for us so that we can talk about things that are happening in our community. I think I would like to appreciate to the presenters who've been presenting when they touch the issue of nutrition in schools. I've noticed that the other presenter said there's lack of infrastructure of water in our schools, especially in rural area schools, and no one is dedicated. I've noticed that one of the things that we need to practice in our schools is to educate our communities about water harvesting, because you'll find that there is infrastructure. It's just that no one is maintaining it. Maybe there are water tanks, the gutter is not longer working. When there is rains, waters are just going through down without going to the water tank, but there are water tanks. You'll find that it's happening maybe in years, but no one is responsible for that. I wish we people who are, especially us who are staying in rural areas, we can use those infrastructures. And if you can see in rural schools, within their premises, they have land where we can practice our agroecology with learners. And if I'm not mistaken, most of schools are fenced, so it's easier to us. I wish for us it can work for us, and I really appreciate everyone who has started to work with the schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nothando. Also, can people just say who they are as they introduce, as they start as well? Yeah, and Nothando was speaking from a farming perspective. Meli.
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, then I'm Meli from Humana Climate Change Center in eThekwini Municipality. All right, then also mine it is to appreciate the webinar and as well the additional points to what Nothando she has touched. Yes, okay. My climate center project that I'm running, it is also focusing in terms of improving the nutrition in the schools by establishment of the gardens, and but as well it goes in an extension of helping the local farmers in terms of local food production. Yes, so the one point that I've also got concerned about it is this of the gas that runs off before the end of the month. And with the experience that I've also encountered, like in terms of the countries like Zimbabwe, where we've been, they are more practicing of the biogas digest, of which that it prevents them to be having the expenditures of buying the gas. Instead, they are using what is locally available. It can be the crop residues, it can be the cow dung, and we talk here of the schools that are in rural settlements, of which there is a lot of cattle or livestock there. That fresh cow dung, it can be used to produce the gas. And again, even if they are in the urban areas, there are sewerages there, there are toilets there. Still, that it can be channeled to produce the biogas digest. Yeah, so that's that. And also, again, the sustainability of these gardens that have been established in the schools. It is very true when the schools they've been closed, there is no sustainability. However, in talking to what we've tried to talking to what we are implementing as the project, we have formed the school clubs within the school to say, okay, these are the learners that we for sure know that they are interested on the local food production. So therefore, they are now forming a club, now helping them to say, okay, even the schools, they are closed. We are able to actually organize them even during the school holidays to have the actions in the garden and together with the project. So yeah, those are also the techniques that they might be tried in terms of that this is sustainable. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Millie. Yeah, I think the whole issue of appropriate technology is something that's a very key thing for agroecology in general. And there were some biogas digester projects in eThekwini where they were also testing the safety for using the effluents for vegetable production. So thanks for that input also. And then can I go to Tabani next? And then I'll come to Johan. And please, yeah, and show your video if you can.
Okay. Video. Where is video now? It's gone. It's disappeared.
Don't worry if it's not easy. Don't go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tabani. I'm from one of the schools that were sampled for the survey last year. Yes, we do have a school garden, but we do have challenges. I can understand that some people believe that with the resources that we have, fortunately, we do have a borehole. Most of the things that I'm gonna say is just to confirm the challenges that schools have. One, it's the fencing. The second one is taking care of the garden when schools are closed, like Lawrence said. Fortunately, this year we've managed to recruit two parents who are going to take care. They already started taking care of the gardens over the weekends with some volunteers. And unfortunately, there is not much that directly links the school curriculum with the garden in such a way that learners can be in the garden and take care of the garden. So what we've done, we've just taken a few boys and girls here and there, mainly grade 6 and 7, and formed a garden club. And now that they're seeing the products, more and more are becoming more interested. And we hope that in next year, we will have more members joining the club. When it comes to fencing, it is a challenge. There's an issue with the budget, the funding of the schools, and the schools are not getting the appropriate funds in time and on time, and it's very difficult to include into the school budget the fencing, because to start with, we've got like 1,200 learners, and our garden is just about 25 by 25 meters square area. And from what we get from there, we cannot fit the whole school in one day. So what we do, the learners that are in the garden, they take turns to benefit from the garden. We cannot implement that into the NSNP program, the National School Nutrition Program, but they are taking turns. We say every Friday or each time we see that something is ready, and we just get to that group 4 or 2, and they take turns in that. And we also share that with the vulnerable children that we identified through our learner support program in the school and the school-based support team. So it's just like that. Fencing it, we have tried the local companies to assist us with fencing. the school doesn't have enough money to buy textbooks and the mainstream things that the school needs, or the school needs. So it's very, very difficult to get the school fenced, but there is a portion of the school that is fenced, and the garden is lying on the fence and the other part is not fenced. And it's mainly that, but also to get the teachers motivated to supervise the garden. It's also a challenge. Some of the educators would go there when they start seeing the spinach getting more greener, so that they can like take 2 or 3 leaves with them. And that's a problem. But when we start preparing the soil and doing everything else, it's just 3 or 2 of us. And when it's getting ready, everyone wants to be around the garden. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that input direct from the school's experience. Johan.
Hi, thank you. And thank you everyone for making the time. Thank you for the hosts for actually putting up this webinar. I think this is a very, very important subject, because if you want to fix something, you fix it from the bottom up. I am the district chair for Lions Club 14E, which includes Eastern Cape, KZN, Eswatini, Northwest, Limpopo, GP, who else? Okay, we're a lot of people. Okay, so I'm heading up a environmental nutrition reboot system coming in starting on the 1st of July, where it exactly tackles this specific topic, but not in terms of funding, but in terms of ingenuity. I think the problem that we all sit with is that we tend to look into the challenges more than where the opportunities are. And what we're trying to change is to say, okay, right, fine. You've got abundance of everything around you. You can use that to make a difference. You can use that to make a change. It's not a question about Thabani, and I get where you say 25 by 25. It's not a question about using the soil, it's about using the area. If I may quickly share, one of the projects we're starting with is actually, where are we now? There we go. Yeah, share that one. Okay, is actually using recyclable materials to grow up instead of down. You can get more from a square meter going up than what you can get from going down, which makes something as stupid as this. You can grow spinach in it. The big thing about this, as well as water control, the big thing about it, as well as that you're doing recycling. So there's a lot of bonuses around rethinking our thinking. So in terms of schools, I would recommend, from a Lions point of view, we are out trying to help set up food gardens for schools, for nurseries, at churches, wherever there's open soil, and we've got the mandate to do so, we set up food gardens. So if you can, I'll type our email address in the chat, and then connect up. I'll put you up with a club, and the clubs can help tend these gardens when there's nobody else at school, and also help give direction. One of our big winners was actually Lenasia Lions, where they partnered with local farmers, and in the local schools they started setting up these food gardens. Okay, and it's not just about getting the garden, growing it and then eating it. It's about the education around it. It's earthworm farming. There's a lot about on it. If you make it interesting enough, you'll get a lot more buy-in into your project. Pretoria South Lions recently got 6 hectares out in Hammanskraal, where we're putting up there, and the goal is to set up these technologies to grow food to benefit the schools. If I take on the West Rand, we've got 14 schools that are running out of food on a daily basis, because why? Churches can't donate anymore. The Pick and Pays and the Woolies have dried up because they've got limited budgets as well. So what we need to do, we need to think otherwise. I'd encourage everybody just to, take that step back, re-evaluate and rethink your thinking, and then tackle the problem from a different direction. I'll put the email address in there and get to me. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that input. And I mean, people have been sharing and connecting up through this. David Fig had quite some interesting comments also around the need for materials and ways to introduce the gardens as outside classrooms. But he had a very good point around how we can maybe use the IDP to hold municipalities or hold, to bring improve the nutrition program. And I was wondering if Stha would be able to speak to how the school nutrition program links to the IDP at all. Stha, did you come across? Or David, would you like to add on that or share? Yeah, great. Please, you muted. Please share.
No, I don't want to make it too complicated. So if we can get some basic information, that would be great.
Yeah, and you're saying particularly to hold local councillors responsible, link local councillors into the nutrition program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Stha, I don't know if you've come across anything around that. If you have, then please indicate.
No, I didn't come across anything that links it to the IDPs, actually, no.
But it's an interesting question, and I think it's
Yeah.
something to consider because also at a national level, the food and nutrition security policy plan is being redesigned. It's slow. It's supposed to already be developed, but civil society has been trying to give input into that and to bring agroecology into it, to bring indigenous crops into the nutrition program, and to develop structures or have structures that can do the integration in a similar way that's happening in Brazil and start holding more people accountable for this right to food that we have in our constitution. So yeah, Lynn's also mentioning traditional leaders who are often closer to farmers. Lynn, I don't know if did you put any comments around Norma's question around how children who aren't at school are being catered for? Because there's also concern that not everyone is in school who needs support. And then Henk, you're also mentioning, the local municipal plans to align with the IDPs, EMFs, and all of those. Lynn,
Vanessa, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
Do you want me to chat? Can you hear? Yeah.
If you've got any input, that would be great.
I've been taking a while to try and think what I could say because this is such a massive topic. And I must just say that it's been a wonderful webinar. I've really appreciated getting this input and the feedback from all the researchers and the people on the ground. I just in answer, the question I think was around what happens for children who are not in school and their nutrition. And I work in the ECD space more than schools, but we support ECD centers with food gardens and are very involved in trying to improve nutrition. I just wanted to say a couple of things. If the family can't afford to send a child to an ECD center, then it means they're not even getting the meal that they could get at the ECD center. So they're obviously going to get even less food because they can't even pay for the fees. And that, I think, is one of the issues around the ECD sector is that government doesn't, ECD, to attend an ECD center, you have to be able to pay. Not that everybody does, but you're required to pay, whereas in a school is free in quintile 1 areas. So you're already at that very early age when nutrition is so critical for growth and for learning. Children are already being disadvantaged. So there's a lot of work that's happening around this at the moment. I think the president's been speaking about it and so on. And there's a lot of advocacy around school feeding at ECD level. I just think this is such an anomaly that where children really need nutrition in the early years to get their brains growing, they actually don't have the provision that happens even within a school, as limited as the school's provision is. So there is a shift. This is shifting at the moment, as I say. But for children who don't go to an ECD center, absolutely, they are really severely at risk and experiencing there's a lot of malnutrition. So we've done growth monitoring in ECD centers, and even in an ECD center, you'll see quite a range of nutritional levels presenting. I think in Botswana area where we did some growth monitoring last year, we found that 10% of the children that were attending ECD centers were stunted. And yeah, I mean, and then there's another issue that's starting to happen is where children do get sufficient food, it's not always the right food. So the thing I'd like to say, just to end off what I'm saying, and as I say, this is such a complex and vast topic, but just it's not giving children more food, it's giving children the right food, the food that they need. So children are not getting enough protein, they're not getting enough fresh vegetables and fruit, and a lot of the feeding schemes are trying to get children to feel full and have more food, but that they're not getting what they actually need for their growth and development and learning. So I'm quite interested, a topic that came up at a recent DG Murray nutrition webinar recently, this was around, could food gardens provide more protein? I mean, are we able to identify foods that we can grow in food gardens, in schools and in ECD centers that actually give children more protein, because that's what they really need. So I think that's quite an interesting area to explore. It was raised by someone from Tanda, Angela Larkin from Tanda, and they've been doing some research into that. But I think these are, when we talk about what are the things that we can do, the small things we can do that can make a difference. I think if we could look at those things, then, you know, that type of thing, I think we'd really be trying to shift the needle a bit. But just to say that from my experience, we've had so much training from Biowatch, and we use agroecology in the ECD centers, and it's not a magic wand, it's hard work, and there's a lot of behavior change that's needed, but I really can't see any other way to do this work and to really make a difference and work with the environment as well. So I really think there's such a strong case for this, and for having farmers trying to create systems where the farmers around schools and ECD centers can actually provide food to these communities. So yeah, I hope that's helpful, Vanessa. I just feel like there's just a mountain to talk about, but it's good to bring this up. And yeah, just my heart goes out to the children that don't even have a facility to go to because they're not even getting the food that they need. Yeah.
Thanks, Lynn. And yeah, it's an important note around foods that have more protein, and obviously the legumes do. And they're also so essential in agroecology for improving the soil, providing livestock feed, many other uses. So yeah, really all around great, and good for lowering diabetes, etc. And I just wanted to check before we close, David, did you have something that you wanted to say still?
I'm just adding to the thing by recommending combination of rice and beans as a perfect protein, which we can learn from our Brazilian partners.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, I think, are there any last comments from our panel? I don't see any hands or unmuting. All right. Thank you very much to everyone who's participated today. It was really rich conversation, and I think there's so many people who have an input to make, and hopefully we can really do something in policy and practice to have better nutrition for our children. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thanks, colleagues.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.